sobriety is a gift, and it's the most wonderful gift that could happen. There's benefits to alcohol from the medical industry and for a variety of chemical purposes, but for consumption, I believe absolutely not. There is no benefit to it, zero. If we are using substances to change our minds, we're not getting the clarity of mind to actually get into that flow state and maybe even overcome those fears. My focus is on one day at a time. One day, just today, I'm not going to drink. You'll thank yourself if you give yourself that gift of sobriety, even just for a short time. Hello, friends. Welcome to Flow Over Fear. I'm so glad you're here today. My name is Adam Hill. I'll be your host. And today I want to talk about some of the lessons that I've learned through sobriety and also some of the myths that I held on to over the course of my alcoholism that kept me from wanting to get sober. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because with 12 years of sobriety, I've had a long time to reflect on the benefits of sobriety. And the benefits were not always there for me. It wasn't always something that I felt was a great thing. I wasn't always on the bandwagon that sobriety was this awesome thing. I mean, for many years, for over a decade, alcohol was my best friend. And I'm not going to say that it was a very good friend. It was a terrible friend. But it was a friend that I had, nonetheless, that I had a very dependent relationship with. And when I had the realization that I could no longer drink anymore, I had this conflicting mindset that I wanted desperately to stop drinking. But I also felt like I couldn't. And I felt like I was losing something very important to me, like a very, very, very close loved one. And if you are in the rooms of recovery or have some time in sobriety, you may understand what I'm talking about. And maybe if you're not, you may not understand that. And that's okay. It's a very difficult, addiction is a very difficult thing to understand when you're not living it. But when you have loved ones that are experiencing it, it can be very, very traumatic and very, very tragic. So I want to talk a little bit about this because for those that are in the addiction, that are feeling like there's no hope, know that I was there, know that many people were there, but I in particular was there on the very last day that I drank and the very first day that I was sober. I was 100% hopeless. I didn't feel like there was any hope for me. But I was willing to step into the last house on the block that would have me. And that was the rooms of recovery, the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And over the course of the last decade or more, 12 years to be exact with regard to my sobriety, I have come to realize that sobriety is a gift, and it's the most wonderful gift that could happen. Because today I've lived such an abundant life, and by God's grace, I don't need alcohol anymore. I don't feel like I desire it. I have no desire for it. In fact, my mindset on alcohol completely has changed, where I look at the world around me and I ask myself, is there any benefit to alcohol existing in this world? As a consumable, let's put it that way. I mean, yes, there's benefits to alcohol from the medical industry and for a variety of chemical purposes, but for consumption, I believe absolutely not. There is no benefit to it. Zero. Absolutely none. And depending on where you're at in your evolution, you may disagree with me on that. You may be someone who loves to drink wine and you can enjoy it responsibly, and that's fine. Or you can be someone who enjoys to drink beer with friends and uses it as a social elixir, and that's fine too. But I want to be provocative, and I want to challenge people on this, because even if you don't live in the ism, even if you don't live in the alcoholism, and you're not drinking destructively, I want you to really dig deep and ask yourself if there is any real purpose to it, if there is something there that benefits you, or is it a hindrance? That's why I want to talk about it on this show, Flow Over Fear, because from the fear standpoint, we use alcohol. Whether we do it on a small scale or a large scale, we use it to change our minds. in some way, either to calm us or to subdue some fear or anxiety that we have in our lives, or to suppress the things that are traumatic for us or uncomfortable. We do that. That's why we use it. We use it as a social elixir, some way in which we can find greater, be more comfortable in social situations. Again, pushing away the discomfort or the challenge that might be that. But when we want to build strength in any area, what do we need? We need resistance. So when we need resistance, maybe we need our full capacity. Maybe we need our full capabilities. And then from the flow perspective, we look at drinking as a hindrance of our flow, meaning like if we are using substances to change our minds, we're not getting the clarity of mind to actually get into that flow state and maybe even overcome those fears. We're not giving ourselves the opportunity and the grace to feel the feelings, as bad as they may be or as hard as they may be to feel, and actually work through them and process them. When we don't give ourselves that opportunity, there's no healing. And when we drink to really suppress those things and we're not healing, we're creating a lot of resentment, a lot of baggage. We're putting a lot of stuff inside that we're not dealing with. So yeah, I've come to believe that there is really no good that comes from drinking alcohol anymore. And if that is something that is your jam and you enjoy it, I am definitely not going to be one to poo-poo on your parade. But at least in my world, that's how I feel. And I've heard it more often, frequently from the communities that I'm in, like whether it be the triathlon community or whether it be the GoBundance community or different communities of people that I am in. I am hearing more and more often from people who just want to pursue bigger things for themselves, that I hear it exactly this way: alcohol just no longer serves me, so I don't want to drink it anymore. And these people, they don't necessarily have a problem with alcohol. Like there's not an addiction there. But some of these people have just said, it just doesn't serve me anymore. So I just stopped doing it, and I feel so much better. I feel so much stronger. I feel better able to do the things that I want to do. So yeah, complete abstinence from alcohol or drugs, or gambling or whatever addiction you might have is a great way to start to find greater flow in your life, and also to start processing the pain or the struggle that you might be having. It was interesting. I was on a flight last week I was coming back home to Denver from San Diego from the EOS conference, and I was sitting next to a couple of 25-year-olds who were very social, very outgoing. And so when they sat next to me, they were super excited. They were going to go to a concert out here in Denver. And I remember that they were eager to, get their double vodka tonic on the flight to start the party, to get the party going. And they asked a little bit about me. I told them that I was a podcast host, and I told them that I'd been sober for 12 years. And the first reaction from one of the kids is like, "Well, that's incredible, but I'm still 25, so I'm not ready to be there yet. I'm still working on becoming an alcoholic." And he said it jokingly, but in that, I could almost hear a lot of the pain that was in there, because this person needed alcohol in order to have a good time. And it wasn't just painful for me to see from the outside, but it was painful from the inside, because I remembered what that was like. I remembered that I needed alcohol to, quote unquote, have a good time. And that's one of the first myths that I want to bust on that, was that for me, alcohol, I wanted to drink it because I was under the impression that it was fun. And fun for me, by the way, when it came to alcohol, was pre-gaming, drinking to the point where I would be, belligerent by the time that the activity, the event started, like the concert started, so that I maybe was having some sense in my mind that I was enjoying it, but in reality, I was on my way to a blackout. And then I would probably pass out a little bit later, wet the bed, wake up with an enormous hangover and a lot of shame and a lot of anxiety. And I would have to live that experience again. So yeah, tons and tons of fun. But that was one of the myths that I had to that I eventually broke about it, that it wasn't fun. That now I can actually go to a concert and really enjoy it, or I can go on vacation and not have to drink and actually really enjoy it, enjoy being outside, enjoy the abundance of the world. And that's what I would challenge you to do. Is even if you're not drinking at an alcoholic level, that maybe take a week or take a couple weeks or take a couple of those activities that you really enjoy, that maybe you feel like alcohol amplifies that experience. Try to enjoy it sober. Try to see how it makes you feel over the course of time. Does it make you enjoy it more? Are you more aware of your consciousness, or are you more able to experience the joy of that experience? That's one thing to do. And so I don't know, what became of those two kids. By the time they got off the flight, they were pretty loopy and feeling no pain. But that was kind of that. Then there was another one of the myths that that I wanted to share. There was that I needed it to be social. I felt like in order to be social, I needed alcohol. And while it was true that the very first few times that I drank while I was in college, that I felt a heightened sense of my ability to be social and connected, that was true. That those first couple of experiences, because I was so kind of antisocial or had this social anxiety, that social anxiety was lifted from me in those first couple of experiences. What was the actual reality of over the course of my drinking career was that I was spending all of my time trying to chase that feeling, that first feeling that I had with that alcohol. Now, if you are drinking for social purposes, ask yourself that question. Is it something where you're legitimately feeling more social because you're drinking, or you're feeling more connected to others? Or are you suppressing some anxiety or social anxiety that you might have, and maybe chasing some experience you had long ago that you want to get back when you have that drink? That's one question I would consider. And then also, I would challenge you to think about the idea that in those social situations, maybe spend a few of those next social situations not drinking, and challenging yourself to kind of move beyond the social anxiety. And again, if this is something that is very, very difficult for you, remember that therapy is a good way to work through this, or getting help from a mental health professional is a very helpful way to work through this. In fact, if you're struggling with the addiction side of it, I would really encourage you to go into those rooms of those communities, because that's where you're going to find the social aspect. That's where you find the healing, is in the community of support through things like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, or whatever drug of choice or vehicle of choice that you have for of addiction. So if this is a severe addiction, find those communities, because that's the reality of what happened. I believe that I needed it to be social, but what really happened over time is I became a more severe alcoholic as I became antisocial. I used it as an isolating mechanism. I used it as a way. I drank alone. That was my preferred thing. I would be in hotels, traveling, and just drinking myself into oblivion by myself. It wasn't a social elixir for me, despite how much I wanted to say that or believe that for myself. But really, the first community I found, the first connection I found in my life beyond alcoholism, was the community of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that was the first time I actually felt connected beyond drinking alcohol. And I found that it transcended that entire feeling of quote unquote bliss that I would get from being drunk. Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day-to-day. We get distracted. We face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey. But now I had it in reality, and I had it completely sober. And ever since then, I've been able to develop these communities and social aspects to the point where when I rate my social my social life from a 1 to 10, I rate it a 10 every time today, because my friend base is so much better. My communities are so much better. I cannot speak for the benefits of sobriety more than for the social aspect. When you could work through those social anxieties you might have on a sober level. You also get to see more authentically the people and connect more authentically with the people that you may be around. It could be that the reason that social anxiety is setting in so much is because maybe it's not the community that you need to be a part of. Maybe you just need an elevated community. And that's one aspect I would ask you to consider with that. And that leads me into the other aspect of it, which is what made it hard for me to get into sobriety or get into the community of Alcoholics Anonymous, was because of the other myth that I bought into. And this myth was that sobriety, that ultimately I'm not like other alcoholics. So when I was growing up, what I came to believe, because of the DARE program, which was an enormous waste of time and a complete failure, because we didn't seek to understand the mental health aspects of it. We just wanted to say how bad drugs and alcohol were, but we didn't want to address the fact that many of us fall into the addiction. So we just basically fed into a shame spiral for a lot of people who became addicts. So, by the way, thanks, DARE, but I'll get off my soapbox on that. But I think the idea that it imprinted in my mind over the course of growing up was that alcoholics were mainly these people that slept behind dumpsters, or they were people that rode Harley Davidsons and drank Jack Daniels, and joined biker gangs and all of these things. That they were really scary people. They weren't people like that you would meet in business or in a career. And so, of course, I adopted this idea that, well, since I'm working, I have a career, I'm functioning, I have a family, I couldn't be an alcoholic. I'm not like one of those people. And that's the feeling that I adopted. And it was reinforced by this idea that I was just obviously holding on to this hallucination that alcohol was something I wanted to continue to partake in. And obviously that didn't help. But it was when I was at my lowest sense of desperation, when I was feeling hopeless, and I decided that I was finally willing to step into those rooms and get help from people, that I realized that there's more that I had in common with alcoholics than not. And the first and foremost thing that I had in common with them was that I was an alcoholic, that I am an alcoholic, that I shared in that malady with a very diverse and large group of people that, ultimately were not the people that were sleeping behind dumpsters. They're doctors, they were lawyers, they were teachers, they ran the gambit of all sorts of people that were living in our society, and they do, and that's the reality of it. And that's, I think, what's important to remember about that is when you're kind of looking at sobriety, instead of looking at it in that way, look at it. Look is something that you're just not like one of those people, or you don't want to be like one of those people. Get down to the honest truth of it's really not easy to get sober, because our brains are really attached to this drug that we have in our that we've been using for so long as a coping mechanism, and it's quote unquote helping us to push down the real trauma, the real things that are weighing heavily on us. B, that we need a community of support to really heal through those issues, the things that are the ism that are causing it. And that see that community we have a lot more in common with them than we ultimately thought in the first place. And that when we can lean in with willingness, we can start to heal. You can start to heal. So find the similarities, not the differences, and then just focus on it one day at a time. And that leads to my third myth, is that sobriety was a life sentence. I believed that if I set foot into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was admitting that I had a problem. I mean, in fact, that is the very first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, is that you need to that you admit that you're powerless over alcohol. And by doing so, I would have to admit that I had a problem. And by doing that, I would have to admit that sobriety was my only solution, and that sobriety was a life sentence. I would have to be sober for the rest of my life. And now, while I'm sitting here 12 years sober, and my hope is that I am sober for the rest of my life, my focus is not for the immediate future, the infinite, or the finality of it. My focus is on one day at a time. One day, just today, I'm not going to drink. And if that urge pops up, which by God's grace, I haven't had that in a long time, but early on, I had that urge many times a day that I wanted to drink. And then in those moments, just for today, just those 3 words, just for today, I'm going to stay sober. I'll go to a meeting and I'll just stay sober just for today. I'm not going to think about tomorrow. I'm just going to think about today and just make it through today sober. Hit the pillow today sober, wake up tomorrow sober. And then that'll give me the proof, the evidence that I can do it for one day. And if I can do it for one day today, maybe tomorrow when I wake up, I can think the same thing, and I can think to myself, just for today, and I'll do the same thing tomorrow. And I'll stack enough of those days on top of each other so that over time, maybe I'll get to the point where I don't have that desire to drink anymore. And maybe, God willing, I actually get the sense that sobriety is a gift, and it's wonderful, and this abundant life that exists beyond the deep urges of alcoholism can be this fulfilling life of beauty and joy and abundance. And one of the final myths, in addition, there's many other myths that I led into. One of those including that I don't have time for recovery, which is a big one. That was just me telling myself that I didn't want to pursue it. But to say you don't have time, if you're spending much of your time, drinking, well, then you have time to spend in sobriety. There's just no question about that. But I think that one of the things that I always thought too, as far as a myth is concerned, is that, well, if alcohol has been such a staple in our communities, in our world for so long, for millennia, since the Stone Age, for crying out loud, when they realized that you could ferment certain fruits and drink of them, I thought, well, I tried to rationalize it that way by saying that, well, if that's been the case, well, from a ritualistic standpoint, wine can't be that bad, right? Beer can't be that bad. I mean, heck, Jesus Christ drank wine. Why? How can it be bad for me? It's healthy. Doctors are saying it's healthy. One reality, if we actually look back into the history of alcohol, we can look back to the biblical times and look at what they were actually drinking and what they were drinking for. And yes, they were drinking it for celebration. There's no doubt. I mean, a lot of the literature back then was talking about the celebration of wine. There was alcoholism back then. There was addiction. There's no doubt about that. They talk about drunkenness in a lot of those ancient scriptures, including the Bible. But the reality is too that for the most part, a lot of times wine was added to water. as a purification process. So when we're talking about wine, we're also talking about the fact that that for the purpose of sanitation or water purification, we were adding wine or spirits to the water to make sure that we were not getting as sick or not spreading disease through the water, because they didn't have the water purification processes that they have now. And additionally, much of the time, wine was diluted to the extent that it was probably closer to the alcohol content of what beer would be today. It wasn't like the 15% alcohol content that we have today, and certainly not the 40% that we would have in other drinks or that kind of thing. And yes, 5% is enough. I mean, if you drink enough of that, you can get drunk. But by today's standards, we have a lot more potency in our alcohol that make it a lot stronger. And we just get this sense that in ancient times they were just partying all the time, and certainly parties were a big thing in certain cultures. Celebration was a big thing, but to the and that really hasn't changed. But in today's world, as we're seeing the accessibility of a lot of different kinds of drugs or alcohol, we have this sense that, and we're getting it pushed in our face all the time in the form of advertisements or things like that. It's definitely one of those things where living a sober life gets a little more challenging because it becomes such a social norm in today's world. And that's true of not just alcohol, but any addiction. It's true of gambling. I mean, every single sports show that I watch nowadays has many commercials on sports betting and things like that, and those things are just toxic to our world. But I digress. I think that it's one of those things that we have to be conscious of, that when we try to rationalize it based on a historical context, or when I try to rationalize it, it was just my brain lying to me and saying that I wanted to feed an addiction that was helping me to suppress the things that I didn't want to come up. And ultimately, when I got sober and when I finally started doing the work, when I finally found that, I found this beauty in sobriety that was so wonderful. And to the point where today I could not imagine my life if I was still drinking. In fact, I probably wouldn't be here today if I still was. I certainly wouldn't have the family I have. I certainly wouldn't have the career I have, this podcast, the friends, the communities. All of it would be lost if I just continued to drink. And I'm so grateful today that I have the continued willingness to stay sober, because my belief now, and it's took a long time to evolve in this belief. This is really a more recent opinion that I've come to believe, that there is no good use for alcohol in our world. It does not serve us as a consumable. And I would encourage you, I would challenge you that if you're thinking about, giving up alcohol, even if you don't feel like it's a problem, if you're thinking about giving up alcohol, I would encourage you to look into doing it, and maybe just take it one day at a time, and challenge yourself at your next social events, parties, or things like that to do that. And yes, you will have people trying to maybe convince you to drink or push drinks on you, but challenge yourself to say no in those instances. Stick to water, stick to club soda, grab a mocktail, pineapple juice, whatever it may be. But I think you'll thank yourself if you give yourself that gift of sobriety, even just for a short time. And if you do have a problem with it, find help. Help is an abundant resource for the addict. And Alcoholics Anonymous is a great resource if you're struggling with alcoholism. So please get help, and know that sobriety is a gift, and it's a wonderful thing that continues to give in dividends if you do the work to stay sober. Thanks for joining me today. Hope to see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular, and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend. And that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.